Traders, how are you? Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy, co-founder of Speed Up Trader. This week, in the recap, we have altcoins like Doge exploding. We have hail taking out roofs in Texas. And we even have, finally, the central bank in the United States reporting a little bit of inflation. Let's get going. Overall, the main kind of overarching stories this week were the inflation fears, obviously, in addition to the military tensions in China and Taiwan. Remember that situation where China feels that Taiwan is a rogue island that is part of China, whereas Taiwan says they are an independent country. U.S. stocks for the week are mixed, mostly positive. The only one that was negative was the NASDAQ, which went down about 1.53% or so. Overseas market concerns, the situation in India is there's a lot of people, a lot of cases. They have 18% of the global population at 1.4 billion people, and they're getting right now 46% of all the new cases. However, the percentage of deaths, meaning that the mortality rate is 0.01%. So keep that in mind when you guys are, if you're overly scared, just keep in mind that it's not, let's just leave it at that. Other than that, they're having over 400,000 daily new cases of the COVID identified. European stocks hit a record high on Friday with strong economic data from Germany. Remember, Germany is the biggest economy, most important economy in Europe, and the fourth largest in the world. European markets were mostly higher for the week. The most positive ones were about 2-3%. In Latin America and Canada, those markets were higher as well. In Canada, that market was just above 1.99% positive. And then in the Middle East and Africa, that was mostly mixed, with the only winner being South Africa at about 2.36% positive. In the far east, we have the Nikkei in Japan being the most positive of them all. It was mostly mixed week for the Asian markets as well. And in big news in Bitcoins, a lot of the altcoins right now, it's crypto mania with everything absolutely exploding. Doge exploded to about 70 cents or so. I got to do a much better job of uploading the videos. I did a great video on the Spanish side about the election. You guys want to learn how to invest, right? You want to learn how to read the price, where to get in, where to get out. Even though I'm not a trading advisor, I can't tell you where to get in and out. We do teach people how to do that. And so I did a great video kind of pointing out how to read the price action, because it's the same in any market. And Doge has been a great kind of lesson to be able to learn that. Doge, which started as a joke, remember, went up to 69 cents on Wednesday. It's up about 63% in 24 hours. So far, the past week, it's up 131%. A $1,000 Doge investment on January 1st would have sold $121,052 on Wednesday at the high. Just 12,000%, no big deal. Dash, which is another altcoin, that went up 35% in the last 24 hours. Ethereum Classic rose 50%. As I'm recording this video, Ethereum hit another record high, and Robinhood, as usual, crashed while a lot of people were trying to sell Do and Tyrion, while those surged over 1,000%. And just on a side note here, Robinhood is the absolute worst company that you could have your money into. So be very careful. If you lose your money, you deserve to, because there's already been a history of how they behave. Look at the GameStop stuff where they magically, their system didn't work. It seems like their system always breaks, but that's my rant about Robinhood. On Thursday, the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey stated that cryptos don't have any intrinsic value, and people who invest in them should be prepared to lose all of their money. Now, one of the things as well that I thought was not unusual, but kind of a coincidence, let's call it, is on The Economist, which is the famous finance and investing, not investing, but it's a magazine essentially that talks a lot about macroeconomic issues. And their title on the front page was Government Coin, which is what I always told you, what I think was going to end up with Bitcoin and all the cryptos. Not that you can't make money with them, right? They're always going to go up and down, but I think there's a likelihood that the government can come in and say, nope, you're not going to use the cryptos anymore. You're going to use our government coins. So we'll see what happens with that. Other than that, Bitcoin for the week is up over 13%. For the year, it's still up over 105%. It almost hit 58,000 to end the week. Remember, I pull those numbers as of Friday. Commodities, as of right now on Saturday, there was a ransomware attack in the longest pipeline in the United States that provides 45% of the oil, jet fuel, and other refined products all through the entire east coast of the United States. So if you guys thought gas prices were high now, imagine if they don't open that up right away, what the prices are going to be, and we might see some shortages as well, which I thought was very unusual. It goes all the way from Texas all the way to New Jersey, the pipeline. So very important. U.S. lumber futures extended their rally to another record high this week, shooting above 1,500. Sawmills are trying to keep up with the surging demand in addition to the strong home construction. Depleted inventories and the present environmental analysis has allowed copper to get to $10,400 a ton for the first time in a decade. There are a lot of people that are talking about $13,000 a ton in the coming years. And David Neuhauser, which is a German, Neuhauser, I love that last name. David Neuhauser, founder and managing director of the U.S. hedge fund Livermore Partners, is stating that the copper is the new oil. Oil for the week ran up quite a bit. The U.S. crude went up 2.07%, just under $65, while international crude, which is called Brent, went up 1.53% to just over $68. Gold and silver had a great week. Gold actually had its best week in 2021. It went up 3.03% to $1,831, while silver surged 5.88% to $27.54. Still want to do that video for you guys about how I'm trading right now with the miners. I just closed out some positions for a small gain. Other than that, in financial and banking news, there's a lot of ongoing debate in regards to the money printing and the injection of capital in the U.S. economy. A lot of people are saying that if they continue with such massive spending, it's going to cause inflation, and major inflation at that. I don't know if you guys have noticed the cost of food recently, how that's been going up. It seems like everything is exploding to the upside, and that has to do with all the money printing. Now, remember the numbers that I gave you. I'm just going to say these off the top of my head. The Bush administration, Bush younger, 2008, 2009 crisis, he injected, if I'm not mistaken, around $5.76 trillion into the economy. Remember, the 2008 crisis was because the Clinton administration removed what's called the Glass-Steagall Act, which was basically what kept investment banks that invest and speculate in the stock market separate from actual banks where you go and save your money. The idea after the Depression was that no, you can't take somebody's savings and go risk it in the stock market. So that was removed. We got the 2008 crisis. Bush printed all the money to inject it. Remember TARP? Was it TARP? Anyway, it was a big stimulus. Then Obama comes in 8 years, adds more debt to the federal debt than any other president combined in the history of the United States. If I'm not mistaken, again, don't quote me on these numbers. You guys can go look them up. I believe it was about $8 trillion. And then Trump comes in. We have the COVID pandemic, and he comes in and adds just over $7 trillion in debt. So nobody's worried about the debt. So because of this situation, right, before the pandemic, we have a situation where there's 40% more dollars in circulation now than before the pandemic. So what happens when there's a lot of something on the street? Simple supply and demand, the value of it goes down. And that's why we're seeing the price of everything go up. I'd like to hear from a lot of you in the comments if you guys want to tell me kind of where you're based, what state or city or country, and let me know kind of what you have seen the prices go up by, because I think inflation right now is at about 20 to 30%, and it could go higher if things continue. Now, after that, we have Biden that comes in, right? After Bush, Obama, Trump. Now we have Biden come in, and him in his first 100 days adds in more than $2 trillion, which is literally over 25% of what Trump did. So if we continue at the same rate, we're going to be bankrupt pretty soon. Don't tell anybody I told you. Other than that, the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen finally admitted that if we do have the similar situation where the government continues to spend this amount of money, that interest rates will likely rise, which I think everybody knows already. And the Federal Reserve is also stating that even though the financial system was relatively stable throughout the pandemic and the COVID-19, we have a situation where we have skyrocketing asset prices, and as soon as investors don't have the appetite for them anymore, right? It's kind of the greater fool theory. This is what Bill Gates said about Bitcoin, where you don't have a greater fool to keep buying at the higher price anymore. That's when the house of cards is going to come down. And she says, if that happens, then we might have a problem with the financial system. I would add in there when that happens. In political news, as I mentioned, the Biden administration is pressing for trillions of dollars in additional spending for infrastructure, education, and other priorities that the Democrats want, while Republicans are objecting, saying that it's way too high of a price tag to be able to go ahead and implement. Critics are raising concerns about the situation with the inflation, since we're already starting to see it, even though the government CPI doesn't actually report the actual inflation, right? It's just that funny numbers that the government does to be able to make it look good. And then on Friday, in political news, Colombian President Iván Duque had quite a situation in Colombia where they've been protesting for the last 10 days. There have been 24 deaths reported. Half of them at least are attributed to the police violence, and they started rioting in the street due to the fact that they didn't want a tax reform to be done. Due to the pandemic, obviously Colombia can't just print money like the United States because they don't have a reserve currency like the U.S. does, so they have to balance their books, and because the government doesn't want to stop stealing any money, they don't want to drop the budget of the government, right? So they want to raise taxes on everybody and on everything, and so people went out on the streets. Now it's a little bit of a sensitive situation to talk about. In economic news, the non-farm payrolls increased by just 266,000. I say just because the expectation was 1 million added jobs, so we only got a quarter of that. So that isn't good at all. Apple shares went down 3.54%, which is bizarre because they reported earnings that were $12 billion more than expected at about $89.6 billion. So they had absolutely phenomenal earnings. Phenomenal. But their stock didn't go up. It's probably because it's way overvalued. Even though, for example, Warren Buffett, over 40% of his portfolio is actually Apple, in case you didn't know that. And Peloton shares, the entertainment and also exercise company, issued a voluntary recall for their treadmills because somebody died on them or they've had quite a bit of accidents. So they went down 14.56%, wiping out $4.1 billion off of its market value. The trade deficit in the United States went up by 5.6%. All-time high of $74.4 billion in March, but in line with economists' expectations. And the increase with China, meaning that the amount of trade that we do with China has gone up in favor of China by a record 22%, while Mexico went up 23.5%. And the global semiconductor chip shortage is actually going to start affecting a lot of other markets than just cars. If you guys remember, Ford and GM and all these companies stopped producing so many cars because they can't find the chips for their vehicles. Now they have companies like Samsung reporting that it's starting to affect the production of TVs and also home appliances. LG has also reported that as well. Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, and Charlie Munger had their annual conference this week for investors. Their shares went up 1.8%, and they authorized an additional $6.6 billion in buybacks. And remember, Warren Buffett was always against buying back his own company's stock, but due to the fact that everything is overvalued and he can't find value on the market, he's got to go in and buy his own stock to be able to go ahead and put that money to work because he's got hundreds of billions of dollars in cash just lying around. And in India, as I mentioned, 18% of the world's population has 46% of the new cases worldwide. They've had 20.67 million cases of COVID with about 226,000 deaths, which represents about a 0.01 mortality rate, meaning that the people in India, even though it's a very, very horrid situation at the moment, 99.99% of the people that get the COVID in India are recovering from it. And as of the CDC numbers, the people that are most vulnerable to COVID are people that are above 70 years old and have 2 comorbidities or more, meaning diabetes or heart disease and those kind of things. So a lot of people are worried about that because they feel that they can start to create other mutations. It can spread around the world. And then obviously we're back in the situation where we came from last year in 2020, where we have to shut everything down again and things are not going to be great again. Or you can just move to Florida because everything's open in Florida and there's no mask mandate. So do what's best for you. Bill Gates and Melinda Gates announced their divorce. $134.1 billion is what Bill Gates is worth, most of that in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. A lot of people are interested to know how that's going to be divided up between the two. About $26.1 billion of his wealth is still in Microsoft stock, which is about 19.6%. And near 44% of U.S. millennials between the ages that were born, I should say, between 1981 and 1988 are report of having been diagnosed of at least one health condition. Obesity is driving much of that and one of the root causes of rates in hypertension, diabetes, and certain types of cancer. So as a nation, it's not a good thing for the nation at large because obviously we're not as healthy as we used to be. Debris from the Chinese rocket, which weighs an extraordinary 21 tons, is expected to land somewhere along the Turkmenistan country, the country of Turkmenistan. If you guys don't know where that is, think of where Greece is, right? Go to the right a little bit, where Iran, just above Iran, south of Russia. And other than that, carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel combustion in the EU, the European Union, dropped by 10% last year due to the COVID and the coronavirus lockdowns. However, one thing to note is that China actually has more carbon dioxide emissions than the next 19 countries combined. Keep that in mind too. And in the natural disasters this week, I should say, quite a serious floods that happened in my dear Medellin, Colombia. There was so much rain that literally half of the mountain came down and there was gushing. It was literally like a river in the middle of the streets. It took out the wall and almost the roof of one of the restaurants there alongside the hill. Hail the size of your hand was breaking through roofs in Texas. If you guys remember last week, that happened last week as well in Texas. So my heart goes out to all the people in Texas and Oklahoma. 30 centimeters of snow they're expected to have in Finland this weekend due to the fact that they're having a storm come in, which is also very unusual because we're supposed to be in spring and it's supposed to be a lot warmer. The UK is reporting its coldest and frostiest April on record. If you guys remember Germany last week, I reported that to you as well. And 23 tornadoes touched down unusually at the same time in the south of the U.S. as well. So kind of funky what's going on with the climate. That's your news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next week.